Hey, good morning. I mean, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Professor.
How are you, Alicia?
Good afternoon.
How are you, Tia? Hi. I see seven people currently there, and let me check how many are here in the.
Afternoon, Professor.
Hey, good afternoon. Afternoon. So we okay. So how many? Eight people, um, and I believe. Um, I have eight people. So yeah, everyone in the forum is here, and hopefully the rest of the class will join us soon. So since last class, we've been talking about the income statement, right? And so just to recap what we talked about in the last class. Uh, the two components, right? Two major component of income statement is income and expenses, right? Just recapping what we did last time. And there are income comes from also two components, right? The primary source of income is the sales revenue, right? Secondary source of income, um, something like investment income. In other words, they are all passive income, such as uh, uh, investment income and rental income, things like that, right? And then think about it. If the company has a patent, there will be a license fee, right? Or royalty, copyrights, things like that. Those are passive income, right? Just like one of investment income, rental income, right? And in expenses, largely uh, it comes from uh, direct cost and indirect cost, right? And the direct cost is also called CGS, cost of goods sold. And then cost of goods sold is also called total variable cost. And I told you CGS is the accounting terminology. Total variable cost is the microeconomics terminology, right? And indirect cost is also called OPEX, operating expenses, which is roughly equivalent to total fixed cost, right? And I've been telling you also, just like CGS, uh, it's accounting's terminology, right? Operating expenses, also accounting terminology. Whereas, total variable cost, total fixed cost, they are microeconomics terminology, right? And of course, I'm going to talk more about the total fixed cost later. Uh, but if we define, we defined the sales revenue last time. How do we define sales revenue? Anyone remember that? Does anyone remember that? How do we define sales revenue?
First quantity.
Say that again. You're very muffled. Who is this?
Mukhtar.
Mukhtar. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just speak a little louder, please. Yeah. And you said sales times quantity, right? Yeah, you're right. It's sales times I mean, price times quantity, right?
Yeah.
Price times quantity sold, right? Price times quantity sold. And we can extend this. This is just one item model, right? One item. In other words, when we have just one type of product, but we can extend it to multi-item model, or multi-product model, because all we need to do is simply we can make it using summation, right? Pi times Qi, where I runs from 1 through n. That way we can express, we can even include, any number. N can be any number. If it is, 12, then P1 times Q1 plus P2 times Q2, and we can extend it to like even any number. Now, that was Mukhtar, right? So Mukhtar, you're getting 0.5. And then we also
I have a question. Is it possible to say sum of I equal 0 to n? Is it possible to put 0 here?
It's possible, but if it is 0, then there's nothing. I mean, that's think about it. If you are running a business, unless if I is 0, think about it. You're selling nothing. You're making nothing. You're selling nothing, right? So to be more realistic, right? We start from 1, right? Because 0 means you are. I mean, there can be. How can there be? Think about it. How can there be? Mathematically, it is possible. A mathematical expression, as far as the mathematical expression is concerned, is possible. But that means you are including P0 times Q0 plus P1 times Q1. And we're going like that. But then you wouldn't this is like item number 0. You wouldn't name some item 0, right? Model, yeah, it can mean model 0, quantity of model 0. I mean, unless that's the case, right? Price of model 0, quantity of model 0. Unless that's the case, you wouldn't normally, consider that as part of the models, one of the models that or items that you're carrying, right? So again, if we have, like 10 items, we would start from, calling it item number 1, item number 2, item number 3, right? It's not like we're starting from calling it item number 0, item number, right? So again, it's not totally impossible if you are calling, the first item number 0, right? Unless that's the case, right? It wouldn't be. Now, second, so here, what we can tell is that, revenue is the function of quantity, function of Q, right? because as Q goes up or Q goes down, as Q goes up, revenue will go up. As Q goes down, revenue will go down, right? Makes sense. Some people might ask also, can't we then, isn't it a function of P as well? No. Why? Of course, price can change, but the price is the price is the result of demand and supply. And of course, as the demand and supply changes, price will change. But so but the price doesn't change that easily. Think about it. Have you ever seen iPhone price just fluctuating every day? Have you ever seen? So in other words, the price is also up to a certain point of demand. Price doesn't easily go up or down. I mean, they put out iPhone 3, iPhone whatever, 13 or whatever, and if it is $1,300, although the price can change if the demand goes up, but up to a certain point of demand, the price doesn't go up or go down. And the price will go down, of course, when demand goes up. Price will go down when when supply goes down. What I'm saying is when price goes down when demand goes down, right? But just because one or two people, demand doesn't mean every day. There may be number of people that want iPhone 13 may go up or down every day, but that doesn't mean the price will immediately change, reflecting the so when they set the price at $1,300, then that is for a certain range of demand, while the demand is somewhere between 1 million and 1,100,000, while demand is certain range, the price is held there. And only after, so if the demand, if the price is $1,300, it will hold there, right? As long as they can sell it for $1,300. And then if they can, once everyone who wants iPhone 13, whatever, has been, exhausted, right? So everyone who wants iPhone 13 has iPhone 13. Then there's, no more demand, right? In other words, what I'm saying is there is still demand, but they are not willing to pay $1,300 anymore. So suppose, and then at that point, what happens? They drop the price to $1,200, and then those who are willing to pay $1,200 will pay, right? And then when there's no more, there's no one anymore to pay that price, then they will drop the price. And there are people who are willing to pay $1,100, and so that way the price is held at a certain point, right? And price isn't, price isn't easily changing, right? As long as price isn't easily changing every day, whereas quantity, right? This quantity is not the what I'm talking. This quantity is not the maximum quantity that holds at that price level, right? This price means So not the equilibrium. I mean, this quantity doesn't mean the equilibrium quantity level. This is, quantity demanded. Quantity demanded means, let's say maximum number of people that want iPhone 13 is, let's say, 1 million. But, until we reach that point, right, the demand hasn't been exhausted, the demand hasn't been met. So, for example, until that point, while the demand is, anywhere between 0 to 1 million, it can still increase. While the demand, quantity demand is somewhere between 0 and 1 million, it can still increase, right? So, and also this is not the demand at a certain point, but the cumulative, right? Cumulative. So, quantity is the variable, right? So that's why I'm saying it's the function of quantity, not function of price. Okay, if you have lost, if you have lost track of thought, this I've been, I'm talking about. I've been saying this because I said, revenue is a function of quantity. Yes, quantity is the variable. Okay. Now, we also know CGS, cost of goods sold, is also called total variable cost, and it's called variable cost because the term variable means change, right? Variable means change. So it's unit cost, basically, right? Think about it. Unit production cost, right? Unit cost means unit production cost times quantity, right? So this quantity is also quantity produced. This is quantity produced. Again, quantity is the variable, right? As the quantity goes up, meaning, as the quantity goes up, right? It's the variable. It's the variable, right? In other words, as the quantity goes up, total variable cost will go up. Total, why did I put TVA? Total variable cost. Jesus. I mean total variable cost, right? Because it was variable, maybe, I was carried away. I put, A there. And unit cost, another name, think about it, unit cost, another name for unit cost is average variable cost. Why? Think about it. If we, and we assumed, a Dell computer, if you are Dell, then, it's a manufacturing. Manufacturing, obviously, requires plant and equipment, right? There's no manufacturing without plant and equipment. You have to have a factory. That's the that's the most striking difference between the manufacturing and retail. That the manufacturing is, mainly manufacturing. There can be no manufacturing without plant and equipment. Having the plant and equipment is the most, significant difference of, manufacturing that sets it apart from retail. Now, and think about it. So for a company like Dell, unit production cost, right, which is basically, direct cost, right? Because Direct cost, as I explained, is called such, right? Direct cost is so called because it refers to the cost of the direct input, right? Direct input or factors of production. Inputs or factors of production, right? And I told you direct inputs are capital, labor, and raw material. So suppose it costs, $300 to make this computer. Let's say Model X, Dell Model X, right? And unit cost of Dell Model X is, let's say, $300. That's literally, per unit. That's why it's called unit cost. Okay. And it's obvious, we know very well Dell Model X. So if we produce 0 unit, our total variable cost is 0. If we produce 1 unit, it's if you produce 10 units, $10,000. $3,000. If you produce 1 unit, $300. Produce 10 units, $3,000. Produce 1,000 units, $300,000. If you produce 0, it's going to be 0. So we know it's exactly the function of quantity. And let's say they sell it for $500. If they sell it for, so when Dell makes the computer, the cost is 300. The cost, in other words, production cost, in other words, direct cost is 300, and they sell it for $500. And then, of course, you can buy directly from Dell, but let's assume Dell is only manufacturing, and you can buy it from, when it comes to the consumers, you buy it only from a retailer like Best Buy. So then let's say they sell it to Best Buy at $400. So then $400 is the price, right, for Dell. Okay, $400 is. Of course, if they sell 1,000 units, the revenue for Dell is, $400,000, right? It's $400,000. And here we can see something here. We can see basically, what do you see here? You can see that the revenue and CGS are two sides of the same coin, right? Revenue and CGS are two sides of the same coin. Make sense? Revenue is the price side of the CGS. Revenue is the price side of the CGS, and CGS is the cost side of the revenue. Right? Does that make sense? How come nobody's responding? I see like 15 people here, and I hear no response. All right, so everyone.
I'm listening, Professor.
Oh, okay, great. And does that make sense?
I'm sure it would make a lot more sense when I go over the video and write down notes like I do with all the rest of the videos.
but even just now, I mean, as I'm explaining, I mean, doesn't it make sense? If your uh, if your unit cost is 300, I mean, that's what it. And when you sell it to the retailer, right? You sell it for 400. So basically, if you sell 1 unit, it's 400. If you sell 10 units, it's 4,000.
Yeah, you
And
times
then, yeah, not only that, but the CGS, cost of goods sold, literally, think about the name. The name is already explaining itself. Cost of goods sold. So if you sold only 1 unit, its cost is 300. If you sold 10 units, cost is, cost of goods sold is 3,000.
doesn't that add up to a revenue?
No, revenue is revenue is price times quantity. So uh, obviously you cannot sell when the cost is 300, you cannot sell it for 300. Isn't that right?
Revenue is the other side of the coin.
The other side of the coin, yes. Revenue is the
So
other side of the
sales
coin. So
revenue, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sales
what I
revenue
meant
is
by it.
equal time.
yeah, you guys are all, your voices are all being mixed up.
No, I get what a revenue is. It's just, the total income that you get of the price of goods.
Yeah,
But
total
I'm
income.
grasping what you're saying.
Total income is revenue, basically, isn't it right? Total.
Yes, it
Actually,
is.
yeah. Don't call it total income, because that's when we say total income, that means then you it's both sales revenue
No, I'm
and
only
passive
referring to
income.
the goods and services. When I said the total income, I'm referring to only the goods or services. That's what I mean.
Okay, a dollar value of goods and services sold. Okay, and that's revenue. Okay, the dollar value of goods and services that was sold, that's revenue. And we are only talking about goods here, because we are talking about computer, right? We're not talking about any service in this example. In this example, we're only talking about physical goods, uh, the computer, Dell Model X, right? So think about it. Nobody sells the product at their cost. That's obviously, there's no point in doing a business,
You wouldn't
right?
make profit? Is that what you're saying? Because you're breaking even if you sell for the same amount that you purchased the.
Yeah, there's no profit.
Okay.
Exactly. And actually, you mentioned break even, but yeah, but that's not the break even is not
It's not the goal.
not the right concept here. It's not the right
Oh.
concept here, right? Because break even. Uh, so, but it looks like at least some people are getting it right, and then so think about it. You see the parallel here, right? Revenue is price times quantity, right? So when you sell 1,000 units, revenue is 400,000. But the cost side of that revenue, which is called the CGS, that will be 300,000. Isn't that right? Because the unit cost of this, making this computer is $300. So if you sold 1,000 units, then it would be 300,000. CGS, or total variable cost, is 300,000 if you sold 1,000. Okay, everyone's following. At least that shouldn't be that difficult to understand. Right? Okay. Now, I don't know if you are really, let me, so, this is too much. Now you should nail down exactly. You should nail down the right correct terminology, and you should also associate the terminology with the right concept. I mean, you're just throwing out every word here and there. It will take time for you to digest all and digest and those terminology and instill it inside you. Making those terminologies your own will take time, but think about it. I will use okay, here just to clear that out. So think about it. The company will make the quantity can be or the production level, quantity or the production level will depend on the production capacity of the company, production capacity of the plant. So let's say if you make 1 unit, right? Price is, you sell it for $400. Then the revenue is 4,000. I mean 400. I'm sorry, 400. If you make 10 units, well, price is of course 400. It doesn't change, right? Revenue will be 4,000. If you make 100 units, right? Price is still 400. Revenue will be 40K. If you make 1,000 units, revenue will be 400,000, right? Now let's think about cost side, right? Unit cost, or AVC, right? Unit cost, or average variable cost, right? Everyone understands that average variable cost is the unit cost, right? And unit cost is 300, right? So if you made 1 unit, CGS will be 300. If you produced 10 units, cost of goods sold will be 3K. If you produced 100 units, CGS will be 30K. If you produced 1,000 units, CGS, cost of goods sold, is 300K. So look, think about it. It's exactly, revenue and CGS are not completely disconnected things. They are connected. They are like two sides of the same coin. On one side of the coin, revenue is basically the price side of the cost, right? When 1,000 units are expressed by the price, then it's revenue. And when 1,000 units are expressed by its unit cost, then it's cost of goods sold. So therefore, they also call, it's got another name too. Another name is CGS is also called cost of revenue. Cost of revenue, right? And it should all make sense to you, because it should all make sense. It should. Why is it called cost of revenue? That's because that's the cost side of the revenue, right? And the revenue is the price side of the cost, price side of the CGS. Okay. Now, indirect cost, indirect cost is not directly related to the production. In other words, it doesn't depend on the quantity, right? So remember when I started this, when I began this example of Dell, I said, it would, the striking, most significant difference between the manufacturing and retail is the plant and equipment. And everyone understands that retail doesn't have any plant and equipment. Isn't it right? Plant and equipment is the main characteristics of manufacturing, right? There can be no manufacturing without plant and equipment. So then think about it. For a company like Dell, right, or manufacturing, right, computer manufacturing, how much would it cost? How much would it cost to build the plant? Any guess? Anyone? How much would it cost to build the plant? Any guess? Anyone?
Maybe the cost of the machine.
The cost of the machine?
Yeah, that they have on it.
It's only part of it. Look, before installing the equipment, they will have to build a plant. Isn't it right? So yeah, plant is a building, right? So constructing and it would be it's gonna take up a huge space, right? Probably thousands of acres. Most plants have anywhere between hundreds of acres to thousands of acres, and depending on if it is an automobile, if it's an automobile factory, it would take up like hundreds of acres, thousands of acres maybe. So basically, the land it will be built on will be a huge space, and the factory building will also it will cost a lot to build, on that huge space. They call it even, these days, they call it campus, just like college campus. So probably a college campus, in New York City, it's not that big. It cannot be big. If you've ever been to Columbia, still it would be hundreds of squares, hundreds of acres, hundreds of acres, right? But if you go out to like SUNY something, or Princeton, or thousands of acres. So the plant will be built on like at least hundreds of squares, hundreds of square miles, or hundreds of acres, I know if you I don't know if you ever venture out of New York City, but if you venture out of New York City and even visit like Bergen County, New Jersey, upscale neighborhoods like Upper Saddle River, or especially those areas, Upper Saddle River, or it's just one, I cannot name all of them. A house, all hidden in the woods, hidden in the forest. You don't see houses along the road. You can see houses along the road, but the land they have are generally 1 or 2 or 3 acres. That's their front yard. That's their backyard. So, but it's not that big, compared to any property, size of any property in New York, it would be huge. But so a plant would at least hundreds of acres, right? And then, of course, not all of it is building. Not all, it's like a campus. There should be, a parking lot. There should be, some green space. There should be a warehouse. But hundreds of acres. So basically to start up this manufacturing, you will have to basically invest initially, I would say at least something like $100 million, something like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And that will be the basically the building, and then the manufacturing equipment that will be installed in that plant. It would cost a lot. So total would so the land, the building, and the factory building, and the equipment in it will cost about hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And the construction will take at least a year, right? The construction will take at least 1 or 2 years. That's called initial investment, right? That's called initial investment. And that initial investment is total fixed cost. Initial investment is the total fixed cost. And the reason that is called total fixed cost is because it doesn't change. It doesn't depend on the quantity. I mean, it doesn't depend on the quantity. It doesn't change with the quantity. Think about it. Quantity means, a production level, right? So how many units you produced. Initial investment determines the maximum production level. Isn't that right? Initial investment determines the maximum production level. Why? Depending on the size of the initial investment, right? It determines the size of the plant. And the size of the plant determines the production capacity, right? The size of the plant determines the production capacity. The bigger the plant size, the bigger the plant output capacity will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Think about it. Yeah, of course. Think about it. Let's say the initial investment was $10 million, and the $10 million can only build the plant with the capacity that equipment and with the capacity that can produce, let's say X number of units, X units per year. And X units was determined by that's the size of the plant. The size of the plant is, size of the plant is determined by size of the initial investment. Make sense? So if that X units is, 10,000 computers per year, let's say, with $10 million, you put $10 million into this project. So you build a plant, and the plant is, and obviously with $10 million, it can build only up to a certain plant, certain size of a factory. And this factory, this factory can accommodate only a certain amount of equipment. So that size of the equipment or level of amount of equipment will determine the maximum production capacity, right? And so if we increase the initially it was $10 million, but if we invested $100 million, then we could build a plant. We could have built a plant 10 times the size of the previous example, right? The plant in the previous example, and 10 times the size of the previous example means 10 times the production capacity. It may not be exactly 10 times, but more or less 10 times, because with $100 million you can build a plant that can that's 10 times more what $10 million can build. Right? Does that make sense? Right? So the size of the plant is determined by the initial investment. Now, again, and the construction will take at least a year or two. So this is called, the initial investment. So that means until the plant is finished and all the equipment installed in the plant and everything is in place, you can't produce. You can't start the production until the plant is completed, right? So for the first 2 years, or while the construction is being completed, until the construction is being completed, you cannot make anything or sell anything. For the first 2 years, there's no revenue. There's no income. There's no revenue. No profit. Right? Makes sense? But this has, what can you do? There's no other way. Once you decide to invest in this business, once you decided to start this business, right, and you made initial investment, then there is no turning back. Isn't it right? There's no turning back. The investment, $100 million investment has been already made, right, at time zero, right? This investment is made at time zero. So you have to keep going forward. I mean, there's no backward, because if you cannot back away. If you back away, then that's what? It's like, you are wasting $100 million. I mean, $100 million is not 10 cents. I mean, 10 cents you can forget about it, right? You can put 10 cents into a slot machine, or a dollar into a slot machine, and you can forget about it and you can walk away. But $100 million is not something you can just put into it and walk away, right? So once so that's why it is also called sunk cost. Okay. What that means is this initial investment is already sunk into this business. It's sunk into this business. you know, you have to recoup this, and to recoup this, you have to produce something, sell something, and with the revenue, you'll have to recoup it. And it will take a lot of, it cannot be recovered in a couple of years. I mean, in a few days. It cannot be recovered in a few days. It will take a lot of time. It will take many years, right? To recover the initial investment, not only the initial investment of $100 million, but also the CGS and OPEX up to that point, right? Makes sense? Because you have to sell, and when you sell, you sell it for 400, right? But the cost is 300. So think about it. The difference, the $100 difference, that's roughly profit margin. That's roughly profit margin. But the think about it. That's the basically, you know, from with all of those $100, you know, I mean, if you sell 1,000, it will be 100,000. If you sell 1 million, it will be it will be 1 million, right? I mean, if you sell 10,000 units, it will be 1 million. If you sell 1 million units, then it will be 100 million, right? It will be 100 million. But, you know, think about it. Oh, that not yet. If you sell 1 million units, it will be 100 million. You only recover the initial investment, but what about the what about all the CGS and OPEX up to that point? So in other words, break even means, you know, you have to recover not only the initial investment, but CGS and OPEX up to the point where really break even. Not only recovering the initial investment, but all the cost and CGS and OPEX up to that point. Of course, CGS and OPEX will, but then CGS will continue to go up with quantity, but OPEX, or total fixed cost, is fixed. It doesn't increase because it's fixed. First of all, initial investment is fixed, right? It doesn't change with quantity. When you invested $100 million, it's fixed at that level. You already incurred $100 million. $100 million is already spent. So it doesn't change with the production level. Make sense? So in microeconomics, they when they say total fixed cost, they focus more on the initial investment. Now in accounting, they focus more on so OPEX is roughly total fixed cost, but the difference is in accounting they focus more on the day-to-day administrative and other fixed cost, not only the initial. So think about it. This $100 million is spread over, right? They will allocate this 100 million over a long range of production schedule, right? This $100 million will be spread over, like, you know, first you'll have to produce, you know, like million units. If you produce million units, then initial investment will be can be recovered. Only initial, because, you know, for each unit you make $100, right? So if you spread it over, you know, a long range of production schedule per each unit, right? This initial investment is allocated and spread over a long range of production schedule and long time horizon. Now, and then also there's a cost that doesn't change with production level. For example, businesses, you may have seen the department stores, lighting up still, even at night. When the store is closed, not only the department stores, but any office building, right? They are lighted, even at night when nobody is there. The building is closed, but they light up the building. Why? It's to prevent, to save energy. That's not a good idea, but to prevent crime, right? Especially if it is, some retail store, they just still light it up because that's to prevent crime, right? Burglars, also, the building needs to be air conditioned and heated. In winter, it must be heated. It must be, regardless of how many people are really working in the building, it needs to be heated and air conditioned. Also, even on Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, nobody's in the building, but they are not completely shutting down the heating or air conditioning. They run it still at minimum, because shutting it down over the weekend and restarting it on Monday, it costs more energy and therefore more money, right? And if you don't heat and air condition the building for a long time, the building actually, dilapidates, right? So to lengthen the life of the building, they continuously, right? They continuously run heating and air conditioning. So all of these things, water, there has to be water, lighting and water and, heating and air conditioning. These things are constant, and regardless of whether you produce 1 unit, 10 units, 0 units, 1,000 units, those things have to be maintained. That's called, so the cost of electricity, the utility bill, the cost of, water, cost of heating, air conditioning, those things are not related to the production level, but it's part of the operating expense. It's something that is fixed. When I say fixed, it doesn't mean it doesn't change. It just means the change doesn't depend on. But sometimes, you may be, air conditioning more. During the very hot summer, July, the air conditioning will be there will be more air conditioning or hotter than September or June, right? But that has nothing to do with the production level. So it doesn't change with the production level. That's why it's called fixed cost. Okay. And there are other examples of fixed cost, but it's already 3 o'clock, so we need to take a break. And I certainly need, my throat needs, so let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. All right, we're back. We're back. So now let's think about what makes operating expenses. First of all, so previously I said operating expenses is roughly equivalent to total fixed cost, and operating expenses are fixed cost, and fixed means it doesn't change. It's fixed. It doesn't, and fixed doesn't mean that it never changes, but what it means is it doesn't change with production level, right? What it means is it doesn't change with quantity produced, right? Quantity produced is, in other words, production level or output level. So operating expenses don't change with quantity, right? Or production level. And so let's think about what doesn't change with, production level, other than the initial investment. I told you, initial investment is already incurred. I mean, that initial investment is a cost that's been already incurred at time zero, right? To start this business, because you have to build a plant. And microeconomics actually focuses more on the initial investment, but accounting focuses more on what else is the initial investment? What else is the fixed cost? So I'm gonna give you some examples, but also let's take a look at the not this one, but our Excel file, right? Because this is a not manufacturing, but this is a typical income statement example of a typical retail business, not manufacturing, but look at the operating expenses. These are the line items in the operating expenses. First is rent. Second, utility. Salaries, depreciation, R&D expenses, marketing. They are generally rent and administrative expenses. But let's think about. So first, why rent? In our example, is rent relevant in our example? Rent is not directly related in our example, because our example is what? Dell. It's a manufacturer. They have their own. We have our own plant. But so let's let's jump into another example, just quickly. Suppose you are running a coffee shop, right? A coffee shop. And in the coffee shop, there are also variable cost and fixed cost. Okay, well, what would be the variable cost? Of course, first of all, because it's a coffee shop, you have capital, labor, and raw material. Let's say. Capital would be like, coffee machine, obviously, right? Labor, if you hire a barista, even if you don't hire a barista, is it A? I'm not sure. And that barista, is it spelled that way? I think it's more like barrister, which is a British term for attorney. But material would be coffee beans, water, sugar and, cups and things like that, right? So they are variable costs because they all change with quantity. Isn't that right? Depending on, you have to pay the barista. How do you spell barista? It really bothers me. Let me quickly check. Barista. Oh, you really write it like that? Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. That was barrister, English for the British word for attorney, right? Like trial attorney, right? That was barrister, not barista. Barista is really, I'm sure it is, from Italian, so it's more phonetical. It must be more phonetical. Barista. It's barista. So I don't know if you pay barista by the hour or, but let's say you're paying barista by the number of cups you sold, right? Number of cups of coffee, right? So they all depend on, quantity. Isn't that right? That makes sense. So if you and let's say you're selling your coffee, you're just selling one type of coffee. Let's say it's Americano, and your price is $3. But that means if you sell it for $3, the cost of coffee, the use of coffee machine, barista's wage, per cup, the amount of coffee beans, water, sugar, all those things are all add up to $2. That's your unit cost, right? $2 per cup, right? That's unit cost, or AVC, average variable cost. So it depends on how, quantity, how many it goes up or down. This goes up or down depending on how many cups you're selling, how many cups of coffee. When I say cups, obviously that means cups of coffee, not the real, the physical cup. And what about the fixed cost? So this clearly variable cost, depends on quantity. I mean, this, and then what about the fixed cost? You have to pay rent, right? That's clearly, and the rent is the part that doesn't depend on quantity. It's very clear, isn't it right? The rent doesn't change with your production level, right? Just because some months you may sell, a lot. Some months your revenue is very high because you sold, in a particular month you sold, 10,000 cups, 10,000 cups of coffee. And if you sell it for $3, that's $30,000, right? If you sold 10,000, I mean, if you sold 20,000, that's like $60,000. Revenue will be $60,000. Total variable cost will be $40,000, right? Now, fixed cost, rent, doesn't go up or down. Isn't it right? Rent isn't related to the quantity you sold. So even during the good month, you pay the same rent, even during the bad month. In some months, you sell, only about 500 cups. And even, just because you sold 500 cups, your landlord doesn't discount, doesn't reduce your rent. So rent is, a typical example of fixed cost, right? And then also, let's get back to the Dell computer. In Dell computer, right? So in computer manufacturing, there are two types of workers. If you think about it, in manufacturing, there are two types of workers. First type of worker is production worker. Production staff who are really working on the assembly line. Two, you have clerical staff. You have clerical staff. Right? And then you will see, let's suppose you double the production level. Currently, you are making 10,000 computers per month, 10,000 units per month. But let's say that's only 50% of the capacity, your production capacity. But you are running at 50% capacity because the demand is just about that, 10,000 per month. But let's say demand doubles. That if the demand doubles, then you will have to double the production. Isn't that right? When the demand doubles, production level has to double. When you need to double the production, then what do you need to do? You will need to double everything. In other words, when the production level, in other words, quantity is doubled, when quantity is doubled, right, you will have to double this, right? You will have to double the usage of capital. You will have to double the labor. You will have to double the raw material used. Isn't that right? Everyone, are you following?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, at least one person is following. I don't know what happened to the rest of the class, but at least one person is following.
I'm here.
I'm here, Professor. I'm here.
You need to. Okay, there should be some vital sign. I see no vital sign. I mean, I hear because I cannot see. When I'm sharing a file, that's the file that I'm sharing is sharing something. That's the only screen that I can see. So you should, show some vital sign. Okay. So everything must be doubled, right? Usage of capital, the labor must be doubled. Material must be doubled, right? But then think about it. How do you double the production staff? I mean, production staff or production workers, there are two. Actually, you can double it in either one of the two ways. You can double it in either one of the two ways, right?
Can you double it by how much you make in your profits?
No, what you're saying, I guess what you're saying is, whether you can double the profit or not. What you're saying must make, a coherent, logical coherence. It must have logical coherence. Okay, I'm talking about, it may double the profit. It may eventually double the profit, but I'm talking about what's gonna have to happen to the when you double. What's gonna have to happen to the production workers? Two things. Either you'll have to double the number of production workers, right? You'll have to double the number of production workers. Or you'll have to double the hours. Right? Now, once again, you want to double the production level. You want to double the production level. And then it goes without saying, all the factors of production or inputs must be doubled. That means capital must be doubled. That means, usage of capital, right? You have to use the machine on the double. Labor must be doubled. Material must be doubled. That goes without saying, right? To double the production level. But then, what about, but the labor? Think about doubling the labor. What does that mean? Doubling the labor means two things, either one of the two things. You can double the number of workers or double the number of hours. But here's a problem. Doubling the number of workers, is it realistic? Is it possible? It's not realistic. Why? The workers working on the assembly line are skilled workers. Especially think about the automobile industry. In the automobile industry, right, the assembly line workers are skilled labor. And the skilled labor is not something you can just come by on the street, right? When you hire them, they must already have some skills from training. They have acquired skills from training or from the previous job. And those people are not easy to come by, right? You cannot just pick up anybody from the street and put on the assembly line. So first of all, even those people who are trained, who are skilled, needs to be trained again to fit the work, to fit the specific type of work required by this company. Okay, so you cannot double the number of workers just overnight. That's unrealistic. And also, skilled labor is in short supply. It's not in abundant supply. So if General Motors has 1,000 assembly line workers, and Ford has 1,000 assembly line workers, Chrysler has 1,000 assembly line workers. I mean, in the U.S. and if that's pretty much everyone you can use, about 3,000 people are the skilled assembly line workers that can be hired in the industry. automobile industry, it cannot be doubled overnight because it requires training and skills certification and things like that. And then to increase the number of workers, if there are no one else available, right? You'll have to steal the workers from your competitor. And stealing the worker from a competitor would cost a lot because you have to offer much higher salary, right? You have to offer much more money. It costs a lot. So usually, what they do will they will double the hours. But of course, this is there's a limitation because a human being can only work a certain number of hours. I mean, you cannot work 16 hours a day, maybe for a week, but beyond that, physically you will break down, right? So in reality, of course, it's some combination of the two. And in reality, of course, there are workers that who are not currently working in the Chrysler or Ford or General Motors, but let's say there are mechanics that are working in repair shops, or there are some excess pool of the labor, so they can increase somehow. They can increase the number of workers to some extent, and they can also increase the number of hours to some extent. But this is either way, they can double the production. They can double the production either by increasing the number of workers or number of hours. Okay, but when you what about the clerical staff? A good example of clerical staff is secretary. Okay, so think about the what's going to happen to the number of secretaries. When you double the production, do you need to double the number of secretaries?
No.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Mukhtar.
Yeah, Mukhtar. Yeah, I didn't even ask who. Mukhtar, okay. You got 0.5. Yeah. When you double the production level, you don't have to increase, double the number of secretaries. Why? Secretaries are not directly engaged in the production activity, right? Secretaries are not working on the production assembly line. So you don't have to increase the number of secretaries, or you don't have to double their hours or double the number of secretaries. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Maybe secretaries, the company will be working, the company will be busier. They will be working harder, right? There will be more faxes coming in. There will be more orders coming in by fax or by email. There will be more phone calls. The secretaries may work a little more. They may be working 10% more, right? 10% more. The existing number of secretaries can handle it. They work overtime, 10%. Then they will be paid overtime. That's it. Number of secretaries don't change. So think about it. This is fixed cost, right? The wages to the clerical staff, this is fixed cost. But the wages paid to the production workers, that's variable cost. Make sense? So rent, fixed cost. Utility, fixed cost. Salaries, this salaries means generally salaries non-production staff, right? Depreciation, R&D expenses, depreciation, R&D expenses, marketing expenses, they don't they don't depend on the production level. They are all certain percentage of the depreciation is not, but R&D expense, marketing expense, they are just certain percentage of the total revenue. Okay, or just a certain percentage of So that explains what goes into operating expenses, right? That explains what goes into OPEX. And accounting focuses more on these, day-to-day operating expenses, right? That doesn't mean accounting doesn't, account for the initial investment. I said, it's spread over a long time horizon, over a long range of production, right? So once we have all the income and expenses outlined and detailed, then what's next? What comes next? Of course, what comes next is subtracting these expenses from income. And when you subtract expenses from income, then that's called, what? It's called roughly, you can consider that as profit, but only roughly. It's not profit yet. Okay, I mean, it's profit, but it's not net profit yet. If you subtract those, right? If you subtract expenses from income, then it's called operating profit or operating income or operating profit. And this is, I prefer profit. In accounting, they use the term income. They use, they use the term operating income, operating profit interchangeably. But I don't like operating. I don't like this term to be repeated. Why? Because income is this. This is income, right? Isn't that right? This is income, and income is gross state. Income means gross income. Income means gross income. And once you subtract expenses, right? Once you subtract expenses, it shouldn't be called income anymore, because it is net of expense. Net of expense, it should be called profit. And you might wonder, isn't pi the symbol of inflation? Isn't pi symbol of inflation? Yes, it was used as the symbol of inflation in macroeconomics, but in microeconomic context, pi is the symbol for profit. Okay, pi is the symbol for profit. So think about it. If income and profit are permutable, in other words, exchangeable, then can we call this profit? Huh? Is it okay to call this profit?
No.
No, never, never. You can never call this profit. This is gross income. So that's why I'm calling it stupid, of accounting to call. But there's a reason why in accounting they use the term income still here. I'm gonna get to that later. But at first, when you are at this point, calling this income, that's not very right terminology. It should be called profit, operating profit. Okay, and there's another name. Another name is, this is also called, in accounting, they also call it EBIT. Okay, and what is EBIT? EBIT stands for earnings before interest and taxes. Earnings before interest and taxes. So from this, you can tell, earnings, that's the same thing as profit. Yeah, earnings is just another name for profit. That's what accounting uses, right? And this name, I prefer EBIT to operating income or operating profit, because EBIT is so self-predicting. It's there's a logic going on here, and that logic is, self-revealing and self-predicting, and it's making a self-prophecy. Why? Because it tells you what's going to happen. I mean, I said self-predicting, meaning since this is earnings before interest and taxes, what do you expect? What should come next? What should come next? Anybody? What should happen next?
What was the question?
What? Come again.
What was the question?
The question was, what should come next? Operating profit is also called EBIT. EBIT means earnings before interest and taxes. So analyze the name, earnings before interest and taxes. So
I got
from
it.
the name, what can you tell? What should come next? What should come next?
Earning after interest and taxes, right?
Yes, but what comes next is actually interest, not taxes. Taxes come later. Okay? It's exactly in this order. This comes first, and then this. Right? So this is why I like this nomenclature. I mean, you will see there will be two columns of names. One column, this column, right? Which is, we call it, in this column, by certain name, and then in this column by another name. But this column of nomenclature has logic, and the logic is, self-predicting. So so that was Mukhtar, right?
Yeah.
What comes next is interest. Interest. You have to subtract interest first, right? But then why interest? I mean, you pay interest. If you pay interest, it's because you have debt. Okay? If you don't have any debt, you don't have to pay any interest. There's no interest. But, if you have debt, of course, you will have to pay interest. Right? So we're out of time already. So we're going to have to continue next time. But keep in mind, and then it's because, you have interest because of, this initial investment. Well, I'm going to come back to that next time. Okay. All righty. Mukhtar, you got another 0.5. It's very, logical and straightforward thinking, that can give you the answer. Only one person has been responding all this time. Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, I'll call it a day now. We'll call it a day here. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and I will see you guys next Monday. All right?
Thank you,
All right,
Professor.
see you, Professor.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take care. Next Monday. See you next Monday. I'll stop sharing. Stop recording.